Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week is another in the series of Tales from the Past, and this is video number 19 in that series. As with all of the previous videos, the stories could be about people, places or buildings in the Wallsend area and are from various different years in no particular order. And this week's video contains stories about the opening of the central schools in Wallsend and about the hospital on the Green. Some of the stories may be slightly longer than others. I do hope you will enjoy it and find it interesting. In 1941, Lieutenant Thomas Stapleton, who was a Home Guard officer living in Rose Hill, was awarded the MBE in recognition of his courageous work and magnificent leadership. Lieutenant Stapleton had previously served in the 5th Battalion Royal Northumberland Fusiliers and had 20 years' service under his belt. It was said that he had shown great initiative in leading his men, and this had been very useful during a recent air raid when a large number of incendiary bombs had been extinguished with his help. Now I know that this is quite a short story, but I do love to hear of someone who had been awarded, and rightly so, for the work they had done during the war. And I would actually love it if someone listening to this story knew Thomas or was related to him. So do please let me know in the comments below if you do know him or you are related to him. In 1879, it was reported that a new landing stage had been placed at Wallsend ferry landing. Prior to this, there had been nothing at the ferry landing for people to shelter in, and it was said that if you arrived just a few minutes too late to catch the ferry, you would have to wait half an hour in what they called a most cheerless place. It seems many complaints had been made over the years, as other ferry landings did have a waiting area, but nothing had been done, and the passengers, stuck out in the cold, could do little to change it. So this new enclosed area was expected to be very popular. But there was no way to describe it as luxurious. It was nothing more than a room with a few seats. It was certainly nothing like the waiting rooms on the railways with comfortable seats and warm fireplaces, but there would at least be some shelter from the wind and the rain in the winter. Now I'm sure many of you will remember Wallsend ferry landing and remember the waiting area, and will probably agree that it wasn't much to shout about, but it was certainly better than nothing. And I remember using the ferry quite a few times, and I always hated that wooden gangplank that led down to the landing itself. I hated that I could see the water under my feet, and I often think that the main reason for this was because I was afraid that the wood would give way and I would fall in, and I couldn't swim. And if anybody's wondering, I still can't swim. The next story is just a little bit of information about the Sir George Hunter Memorial Hospital on the Green. Now, as much as I would have liked to have done a full story about this, I wasn't really able to find as much information as I needed to make a video about this alone. So I thought I would include it in one of the Tales from the Past videos, and if I ever come across any further information about it, I will probably add it in to a later video as well. I also sadly don't have any old photos of the hospital that I can actually share with you, as most of the ones are copyrighted or taken by somebody who I don't actually know, so can't ask their permission. So most of the ones that will be used at this section will be more recent ones, or just photos of where the hospital used to be. In 1937, it was said that as a memorial to the late Mr. Hunter, the firms of Swan Hunter and the Wallsend Slipway had agreed to help with funding to be able to complete the extension to the Wallsend General and Maternity Hospital, as it had been known at the time. The extensions were to cost £12,000, and the Ministry of Health had promised a grant to cover 75% of the cost, so the two shipyards would be aiming to raise around £3,000. Thankfully, it seems the money was raised, and the work to extend the building began a short time later. However, unlike some of the buildings in the past that seemed to be built within a few months, it would not be until 1939 that the new maternity block would be ready to open. And in January of 1939, for 12 days prior to the official opening, the people of Wallsend would be able to come along and have a look around the new maternity block, which had apparently 14 new beds. Until January the 21st, people would be able to visit between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. and again between 6 and 8 p.m. And this kind of reminds me of the actual hospital visiting times that we used to have years ago, when you could visit patients in hospital between very similar or the same hours. I do wonder how many people went along to have a look round before it opened, or how many expectant mothers went along to see if they fancied having their babies in this new wing. Work was still ongoing though, with more work to the general side of the hospital, with a view to people being able to have major operations there and also to treat accident cases from the local shipyards. And this part of the alterations they hoped would be completed by June the 1st of 1939. And the cost of the extensions had now gone up a little, and it was now going to be $17,500. I do wonder if everything was completed in time, as I have to admit to not having had enough time to research this part of the story into the completion of the general part of the hospital. Anyway, I know that you might be wondering, because I was, who was the first baby born at the new maternity wing. Well, I am pleased to say that I can tell you it was William Cruikshanks, who was born in February of 1939. His parents, who lived in Elton Street, received a guinea from the mayor to mark the occasion, and they said they were going to put this away for the baby. Now I do wonder what happened to that guinea. And does anyone know William? Do please let me know in the comments below if you do. To finish this little section off about the hospital, the King and Queen were due to visit the hospital a few weeks after the maternity wing opened. This, of course, would have been King George and Elizabeth, who many of us will know much better as the Queen Mother. It was said they would be visiting the general side of the hospital and the maternity wing, but that the visit would be quite a short one, lasting only around 20 minutes due to their other commitments. So I was just wondering if anyone listening remembers them visiting the hospital, and if you do, as said before, please do let me know in the comments below. To end the video this week, in July of 1913, the new central schools in Wallsend were officially opened. Now sadly, similar to the hospital, I have little to no photos of this school that I am able to use. So for the main part, the photos will just be the location where the school used to be. The schools had been built at a cost of around £15,000, and in today's money this would have been just over £2 million, so it was quite expensive to build. The mayor of Wallsend at the time, Alderman Elliott, who was also the chairman of the Education Committee, made a speech at the opening where he stated the cost to build the school worked out at around £10 per head for the ratepayers of Wallsend, and that this was the cheapest school ever built in Wallsend. The schools, which overlooked Wallsend Burn, had accommodation for 520 boys, 520 girls and 400 infants, and it was mentioned that the halls built for the school had been built to make sure that the boys and girls of the school would always be separated. The architects had been Marshall and Tweedy of Newcastle, and the builder had been Mr. W.T. Weir of Howden. You may have heard me mention Mr. Weir before, as he seems to have been quite lucky in winning the contracts to build various Wallsend buildings. The mayor said that in Wallsend they now had 14 schools, which included a temporary school. Now I was just wondering if anyone out there is trying to count up these schools, because it would include schools in Wallsend, Willington Quay and Howden. And if you think you can maybe name them all, then do please feel free to add them in the comments below. Wallsend also had 189 teachers, and school attendance was also almost at 9 out of 10 pupils. The mayor also noted that pupils in temporary schools would now be moved to this new school, and that the buildings they had been using as temporary schools would be used for another purpose. However, he didn't actually say what for. He ended by giving his thanks to the builder and the architect for their brilliant work, stating that they had provided the town with an exceptional building. The mayoress, Miss Thompson, then declared the schools open, saying she hoped they would be a great success. She was then presented with a silver rose bowl, and I kind of think everyone listening was probably expecting me to say that she got a gold key or a trowel at that point, as that was the usual item that people received when they opened buildings. I actually think that I would have preferred the rose bowl rather than a key or a trowel. During the ceremony, it was said that various school children, presumably from the other Wallsend schools, had also been singing songs. The school was described as having both a boys' and a girls' school in identical design, each having cloakrooms and the same number of classrooms. And as said earlier, although these schools did join, building-wise obviously, the girls would never mix with the boys. And this is something that seemed to be very important for people to know back in 1913, but of course this would all change in later years. Along with the information that the girls' school had a very fine housewifery department, and it was mentioned that they had lessons including cookery and laundry work, and that they would be taught in a special department how to do housework. I have to admit to being glad that things had changed by the time I went to school, otherwise housework and laundry would have been 2 more lessons for me to dislike. The infant school was an entirely separate building with 8 classrooms and a large playroom, and it said that the play yards outside of the school were described as being very large, and that the teachers' rooms, which were on the first floor, overlooked the play yards from the windows, so they would be able to see everything that was going on. The heating had been provided by Ward & Company of Newcastle, the gas lights by Mr. Heslop of North Shields, and somebody called Mr. Hill of Wallsend had provided the fireplaces. The whole event was seen as a great success, and the town councillors felt that they had been doing a very good job on the education front, stating that for several years now they had been building a new school every 4 to 5 years, and these had cost from around £14,000 to £20,000 each to build, so it had been no easy task when the funding for each build had to be raised. But I was a little bit baffled by that part of the statement, as earlier it had been said that the central schools at £15,000 had been the cheapest to build, so maybe someone had got their sums wrong a little bit if another one had been built at a cost of £14,000. Although I can't cover the entire story of the school as the information isn't easy to come by, I will end by saying that the school, for those no longer living in the area, is no longer there, and the new Burnside Community College now uses the land where the Central used to be. Now, my dad went to the Central School, and I'm sure that many of you listening to this story will have gone there as well, so do please feel free to share your memories of the school in the comments below. I do hope that you have enjoyed this short little video and that you have found it interesting. I do apologise for the couple of mistakes and the fact that I paused at one point and I'm not sure why. But anyway, I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.